What's up, meatbags? It's the often imitated, never duplicated Tony TGD coming at you with another video. This time we're going to be talking about the Tommy Tallarico Metroid Prime situation. Now, if you're unaware of what I'm talking about, let me fill you in real quick. Tommy Tallarico was hired as a contractor to work on the sound effects for Metroid Prime. At some point, he was let go of the project, and Retro had brought in their own people to finish the work. Now, Tommy Tallarico Studios, they're uncredited in the credits, the staff credits for Metroid Prime. Now, there's been a lot of talk about whether or not Tommy was fired, whether or not his sound effects were used, weren't used. And so we're going to go ahead and we're going to explore this. This was sent in by one of the fans. If you want a suggestion for a video to be known to me, you could leave a comment in the comment section, or you could hit me up at submissions@thegeekgetaway.com. So let's go ahead, let's dive into it. We're going to start off here with this little post on Atari Age from Tommy Tallarico himself. Now, if we scroll down here, we look at the highlighted selection, he says, "There's one pathetic dope that now insists that I lied about working on Metroid Prime because my name was mistakenly left out of the credits. And he even went as far as emailing one of the sound designers on the project, or so he says. The same folks email our developers as well as our employees. Some try to pose as quote-unquote journalists or quote-unquote concerned fans. These folks are clearly unhinged. By the way, very easy to Google Talarico Metroid Prime and read about the credit situation that they hope they'll dupe people on now. Every week they'll make up some kind of new lie in hopes that their whiny screams will be heard by anyone outside their own echo chamber of negativity. If anyone is interested in knowing about Metroid, here's the very first link that comes up from the official Metroid fan page." And then he gets the link for the Metroid fan page. Now, if we go on over to Moby Games, you'll see it has the credits for Metroid Prime, and we can see the audio lead is Clark Wen. Sound designers that are contractors are Frank Bry, Crispin Hands, Ken Kurita Ditz, and Christopher Larson. No Tommy Tallarico, he's not even listed as being uncredited in the situation. Now, if we go over to a YouTube video here from Metroid Hunters, they got the credits rolling by, and we can see that the credits do match what is in the Moby Games link. It's got the audio lead Clark Wen, sound designers in quotation marks, contractors Frank Bry, Crispin Hands, Ken Kuritz Ditz, and Christopher Larson. Now, if we go over to Tommy Tallarico's page on Moby Games, we can see that it is not listed anywhere that he worked on Metroid Prime. So, did he work on the game or did he not work on the game? According to him, he did. According to 3 sources so far, we see no. Now, if we go over to Tommy Tallarico's own website, the one that he runs, we go on down to the section that has GameCube games. You can see that he's listed Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Neither one of these were mentioned on the Moby Games page for him. But let's go over to the link that Tommy provided, the Metroid, the official fan page. Although there's no such thing as an official fan page, it's just a wikia. So the Metroid fandom wiki says uncredited, as you can see on the screen. Tommy Tallarico, quote, provided audio. So if we go over to the Tommy page, we'll see that it's Tommy Tallarico is the owner of Talarico Studios, blah, blah, blah. And it says he worked early in development of Metroid Prime. This work reoccurred. Stupid page. His work reoccurred throughout the series as well as the Space World 2000 demo. Usually sounds are added in post-production, but Shigeru Miyamoto requested he created really cool sounds with no direction. The opposite of this approach was done for the remainder of the project when Clark Wen came on, weapons first, sounds second. Now, we have 2 links here. We have a link to an interview from Shinesparkers with Tommy Tallarico and a link to an interview with Shinesparkers with Clark Wen. Now, if we go over to the interview with Tommy Tallarico, you can go through the interview. You get all the way down to the Metroid Prime section. And he does indeed tell the story about how Shigeru Miyamoto told him to make really cool sounds and that they would make the weapons and stuff to fit the sounds that Tommy has created. It says right here, I'll tell you a quick Miyamoto story to help you explain. Normally, when you create sound effects for a game, especially weapon sounds, you need to first see the visuals and animations so you can create the sound. When I was working on Metroid Prime as the sound designer, Miyamoto-san had requested me to create weapon sounds, but instead of giving me the visuals, he wanted me to just create interesting and amazing sounds, which would then give to the graphic artists and designers to inspire them to create the weapon. Now, as far as I can find, as far as I looked, I've never seen Shigeru Miyamoto make this claim. I've never seen him come out and tell this story himself when he talks about Metroid Prime. So we're just going to have to take Tommy's word for it. Now in the Clark Wen interview, they asked Clark about the sound effects. Right here it says, Shinesparkers. In the early stages of Prime's development, Tommy Tallarico was brought on board as an audio designer. In our interview with him, he said that Shigeru Miyamoto wanted him to design the sounds of Samus's weapons without any visual reference. This was so the artists and designers could then base Samus's weapons around those sounds. Usually this would be in reverse, with the weapon designs coming before the sounds. What were your thoughts on this unorthodox approach, and do you think it was a good decision? Now, Clark's response is, I think it's a great idea. However, Tommy Tallarico was no longer involved with the project when I started, so I can't really speak to how this approach worked for the team. When I started, only the power and combo beams were in the game. So when Clark jumped onto the project, there was only 2 weapon sounds, the power and combo beams, in the game. So as far as we know, the only 2 weapons that Tommy worked on that were put into the game before Clark Wen took over were the power and combo beams. Keep that in mind. I thought they sounded pretty good, so I more or less left them as is. So right there you can see that Clark is saying that he didn't completely leave them. He didn't just put them in as they were. He more or less, which means he probably tweaked them a little bit. Maybe he raised the pitch. Maybe he lowered the pitch. Who knows? Maybe he extended the length of the sound. He shortened the length of the sound. We're not exactly sure what he did or how much of it he did to the sounds, but he did something. It says, for the rest of Samus's weapons in Prime, I approached them in a more traditional manner, visual first, audio second. So now we have confirmation that Clark Wen did the sounds for all the other weapons in the game. All that Tommy has done was the power and combo beams. Once I did my audio pass, the artist would go back and refine the visuals based on my sounds, and then I would go back and do some more refinements on my end. We'll do this for several iterations until firing the weapon felt just right. So, once again, whatever Tommy worked on, beyond the 2 weapon sounds, we have no idea, but we know that he only worked on 2 weapon sounds that were in the game when Clark took over. Clark then did some kind of tweaking, and that's the final sounds in the game. Now, if we go back to the Tommy Tallarico little Metroid Prime wiki page, there's a lot of other information here that Tommy says, or not Tommy, whoever wrote this article says that he wasn't hired, he wasn't fired for working on the game, that there was an error on Retro Studios' part, and he received an apology for the omission. Now this is very important. He says that he received an apology for the omission for not being included in the game. Now remember, the game came out in 2001. Now, if Tommy Tallarico was given an apology from Retro Studios, I am 100% convinced that Retro Studios would have fixed the error they made when they re-released the game. Now, if we go over to the official Encyclopedia Wiki, the Wikipedia page for Metroid Prime, we can see that the game was indeed re-released in 2009. And as far as I can tell, the re-release did not have any additions made to the credits. Tommy was still not put into the credits for Metroid Prime. This is after receiving a quote-unquote apology from Retro Studios. Now, this apology, once again, was only told to us by Tommy, and you can find it at Tommy's old blog. Now, Tommy, He changed his blog to the official website, so you can't get to this page that I'm on right now unless you go through the Wayback Machine. You can see in the Wayback Machine, Tommy did write a little post about Metroid Prime, and we'll go through it. It says, a lot of people on the internet have asked why my name does not appear in the credits for Metroid Prime and Metroid Prime Echoes. Here's the story. Tommy Tallarico Studios did a lot of the main sound design for Metroid Prime. We also did a couple of cinematics as well. We were the very first sound designers that worked on the game. 3 years later, when the game came out, they forgot to put us in the credits. We stopped working on it because when Retro had 3 other games canceled internally so that everyone could work on Metroid Prime, the internal audio department was then assigned to Metroid and they didn't need my help anymore. No one was fired. My contract just ended. Goes on to say, at the beginning of the project, it had leaked out that I was working on it. I swear it wasn't me who leaked it. Well, winky face. Anyway, I think people had wrongly assumed that I was hired to do the music, which was never the case. Here is a recent email I received from the new audio manager at Retro Studios, the developers of the game. Now, as you can see, this is not actually a screenshot of the email. This is not a link to an email. This is just someone typed out the supposed email that Tommy received and says, hello. It says, hello, my name is Scott Peterson. Yes, it's an unfortunate name these days. This is probably during the time that Scott Peterson had been accused of killing his wife, Lacey Peterson. So this Scott Peterson, not the murderer Scott Peterson, but this one, he's probably just making a joke about that in case you're unaware of current events or what was going on at the time. But back to it, it says, and I have taken over the audio directorship here at Retro Studios. I am in the process of archiving all our audio data and was hoping to get a little help from Talarico Studios. Almost all of the sounds your studio provided were utilized in some way or another, and a few have really become signature elements to the game and to Samus herself. My head is off to Tommy and to Joey. To future-proof myself in Retro Studios, it would be nice to have original sessions and or high bitrate sample rate mixes of all the sound effects. The only drawback for me is that the only sources I have from you guys are at 22 kilohertz. Ugh. Would it be possible for someone to dig around and export some higher sample rate audio or send off some session copies? Any studio time can of course be paid for. I know this may be asking a bit much as the files I have are dated July 18th, 2001. My God. But I just have to ask anyway. Thanks for any and all help, Scott Peterson. Now, I'm not sure when this email, this blog post was made. This capture is from 2015. So, sometime after 2001, somewhere between 2001 and maybe 2005. But probably before the re-release of Metroid Prime. So once again, if Scott Peterson took over for Retro Studios as the director of audio, he reached out to Tommy, wanted higher sample audio. He was congratulating him about making all these sounds. He's now aware that Tommy was unjustly uncredited for the game. But somehow, in the re-release, Tommy Tallarico and Talarico Studios was still not credited. I'm not sure. I have no idea what to think about this. But we have one more source to look at. If we go to Unseen64, great site by the way, you should go there. They got a lot of unreleased stuff. They talk about, early builds of the games, things that were left out, unfinished games, unreleased games. It's a really good site. I've sourced them before. So they got this article here on Metroid Prime. And they talk about different things. And one of the things they talk about is Tommy Tallarico. Now, it says development continued on track following its announcement by Retro Studios was about to be rattled by a series of events with big ramifications. In July, Miyamoto would pay them his second visit of the year to review their work and deliver the cutthroat brand of guidance his name was built upon. Within the first 24 hours, he had went over prototype builds for Raven Blade, Retro Football, and Thunder Rally, before promptly canceling all of them. Unsatisfied with the way they were going, the producer had workers from each reshuffled into Prime, while 20 or so, mainly from the Thunder Rally team, were let go. It says one offshoot of this decision was the subsequent removal of Tommy Tallarico Studios from the project. Previously, they had been in charge of sound effects, but the discontinuations of Thunder Rally and Raven Blade freed up Retro's in-house audio team, meaning their services were no longer required. Correspondence between Tommy Tallarico himself and Retro's Scott Peterson was released on his blog, which we went over, confirming that some sounds they created became very integral to Prime. Once again, this was a blog written by Tommy with not a screenshot of an email, but rather just someone typing out the contents of said email. Now, further goes on to say, however, as we have learned, a decent amount of Talarico's work was discarded too. Comments Miyamoto made at Space World 2001 in August confirmed that he wasn't yet content with the audio sound effects around the stage of development, which might explain why. Now, he has a quote here from that article, but we're going to go ahead and go straight to the source. It's an IGN article about Space World 2001 and the Metroid Prime progress report. It says right here, Nintendo's master designer Shigeru Miyamoto fills in the gaps of the situation below. It says, quote, what I can tell you about Metroid Prime is that for Nintendo, development is working pretty well so that we are overseeing the stage of fine-tuning and finishing touches. As a matter of fact, we were about to present Metroid Prime to the Space World 2001 show, but it doesn't yet have good enough sound effects, and also I was not fully satisfied with the control. So I decided in the end, just a few days ago, that we would not bring it to the Space World show. So, if Miyamoto wasn't happy with the sound effects in the game, we can probably assume that he either discarded a lot of the early work done by Talarico Studios, or at least had them tweaked or changed in some significant way that they would probably be unrecognizable from what they were originally. Now, that leads us right back to our original question. Did Tommy Tallarico work on Metroid Prime? Yes. Is his work still in the game? That's the part where we're unclear. Now, we know that he did work on 2 weapons, but those were tweaked in some way by Clark Wenn. We know that he was worked on some early sound effects, but those displeased Miyamoto. And this is the only time he's ever, to my knowledge, mentioned the sound effects in Metroid Prime in any significant way, about being dissatisfied. So, I really don't know whether or not Tommy Tallarico should be credited. I think that's a question you got to ask yourself. You got to ask yourself, do you believe that Miyamoto had all the early work discarded and had Clark Wenn do all brand new sound effects? Or do you believe that he kept these sound effects that he was unhappy with, but somehow had Clark and the rest of the team tweak these sound effects in some way? Which further leads us to the question, if these tweaked sound effects, would they be considered Tommy Tallarico's original work, in which he would then be credited for, or would this be considered Clark Wenn and his team's work, in which case Tommy Tallarico should not be credited? And again, we do know that the game was re-released, but Tommy Tallarico was still not credited for the game. And really, that's all there is to say about the situation. We just don't know. Miyamoto has not made any comments of it. Clark Wenn really didn't make any comments about it. The only person that's ever commented on it to any real extent is Tommy Tallarico himself. And he says he definitely worked on the game, and his sound effects are definitely in the game, and he deserves credit. But what do you think, guys? Does Tommy Tallarico deserve credit for Metroid Prime? Or was the Nintendo team correct to not credit him? Let me know in the comments. And you know how we do it at this channel. Love, peace, booty grease. We out this bitch.